Today's video is all about taking your trees and going from more flat, boring looking trees to hopefully a little bit more involved as far as bringing some of your trees forward, pushing some of your trees back, making some lighter and darker, and creating texture within your clusters of forests. And you can apply this to anything in your landscape painting. So what I'm using today is my Etcher sketchbook. I'm going to demonstrate 4 little clusters of trees so you can see what more of a flat type of tree looks like, all the way up to a more lively bunch of trees. Now I have my Princeton Velvet Touch Long Round in a size 2 brush here. It's my favorite brush for trees. And the paint color that I'm using is by Daniel Smith, and it's the Perlene Green. It's one of my go-to greens with a little bit of some burnt umber. Now for these trees, I am making the actual trees themselves the same size and the same height. I think sometimes, especially if you're just starting out, it's easy to get all of your trees lined up. But unfortunately, when you line up your trees and you don't have any height, any height differences or even the branch width differences, then it can look very stagnant. And so, of course, when you look at a forest, you can technically see that, but it doesn't really give your painting much excitement, at least from my experience. It's just a little bit flat. There's no movement. My eye's not really leading anywhere. So you can see here, I've made that tree about the same size. Now I've connected them, so this is a cluster of trees. But the branches as well, as you noticed on the left-hand side, they're about the same width, except of course for the very top. It's smaller at the top, but there's no movement here. So on to my third tree now. And I also want to point out there's no variation in the value of my paint. Now, of course, I'm moving some of that paint around because it's wet, but overall it's one solid color. There's no lighter values, there's no real dark values, there's no movement within this cluster of trees. Also want to take note at the base, there's no movement at the base. There's no depth of field at the base. It's pretty much all in a line. Now let's move on to the second cluster of trees. I'm going to use the same amount of value of paint to water, so it's going to be just as dark as the other trees. The only thing that I'm doing different is I am going to change up my height. It's going to give a little bit more life to my cluster of trees, but not much. Again, I'm also not adding, too much variation in my branches. When you look at trees that are really interesting, you have all kinds of variation in your branches. Some are really long and, wide with lots of needles and other branches coming off of it. So I personally think that's a bit more interesting to look at and to paint. But for the purpose of this demonstration, you have a little bit more something interesting to look at by changing up the height, but there's no difference in the values of your paint, color, and then again with your branches, if you can see that here. It's all just kind of sitting side by side. And again at the bottom, there's no variation at the bottom. And I'll show you what I mean if that's a little confusing in the next cluster of trees. So even adding the height difference does make it way more interesting than the first one. But again, we can add a little bit more something extra to it to really bring it to life. So you can see the differences right there. And they don't look bad. They're not bad, but if we want to expand our knowledge and progress in our paintings, then in the next couple clusters, I'll show you how to do that. But I do want to pause here for a moment and show you some of my tree paintings that I've done in the past. And you can see here, of course, I've got lots of mist, but you can see the variation of my trees. They're not all lined up. There's trees in the distance, there's trees moving forward, they're blending together. So you can see that here. And same with when I throw in some colors. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because if you haven't already checked out my course, I do have a course. It's 2 hours long. The first hour breaks down all of the techniques that I use for painting a misty forest scene. And the second hour of the course is a full demonstration from start to finish on how to paint the misty forest. There's lots of tips in here, lots of techniques. It's exactly how I'm painting the forest, how I break down my trees. So I highly recommend checking that out, but I'm bringing it up because I do want to let you know it's currently 20% off to celebrate 4th of July. So it is a flash sale. So if you're seeing this video right now, it's 20% off. It's originally $68, so you can get it for much cheaper. Be sure to check the link below or visit my website at jackiepeacock.com /courses. All right, let's get to the third cluster of trees. Now, this one, we are going to take our perline green, but the major focus here is we're going to vary up the water and the paint ratio. So right now we're starting just like we did the other two clusters. So it's a thick amount of paint, and we're going to lay down our first tree. But you'll notice the difference is now this tree, I'm going to focus on making some of those branches longer and shorter throughout the length of the tree. So it's not going to be just a cone looking tree. We don't really want that, or I definitely do not want that in my trees. So you can make some of them longer. They can gradually get really long towards the base of the tree. I typically do that, and that's just because it's easier to blend the trees that way, but it's up to you what you want to do. So right now it's already getting a little bit more interesting compared to the first two. Using the same amount of paint from the top of the tree to the bottom part of the tree. So nothing has changed from what we've already done from the two previous exercises. But here's where it changes. If you rinse your brush off and you pull another branch without adding more paint, you're just pulling up the wet paint that's already on your paper, and you're taking a little bit more water and you are creating the lightest wash of that second tree. This is going to push that tree back and make it look like it is behind that original tree. You could, of course, paint a bunch of light trees and then go in with your medium value of paint and paint over those, and then go in with your darkest value of paint and go over those. However, then you start to get into what looks like very clear layers of trees. And I do want layers of trees, but I want these trees to blend and melt into one another. So that's what I'm demonstrating here. Now I'm taking a little bit more pigment, making it a bit darker, and I'm adding more space between that first tree and now this third tree. So you can see that there. And I'm making sure I touch the trees together while they're still wet, because that's going to help them blend together naturally and seamlessly. So that's my little trick when it comes to getting your trees to blend together, trying to do them all while they're still a little bit wet to make it easier for the transitions. It did get a little bit lighter there, not a big deal. Again, that tree is still wet, so when I lay down this tree, which is darker than that third tree, we're on our fourth tree now, you'll see that it will naturally start to blend together. So right there, having a nice little seamless transition. Making sure I'm keeping and preserving some white space, right? Because I don't want it to be completely gone. I want to make sure that there is some breathing room between my trees. And now my darkest tree here, blending it into that softer tree. And sometimes when you do this, a tree will disappear. And that's totally fine too. because then you'll just have a natural blended tree in the background. And I also want to focus on the bottom there, so you can see it's not all a straight line. That tree on the left, I extended it and I pushed that tree forward. And now this tree, I'm doing the same thing. So as I get to the base of this tree here, it's going to go past those middle trees, pushing that one forward as well. So that is looking pretty good to me. Now let's make it even more interesting. And you're doing the exact same thing, but this time what you're doing is you are changing up your colors. So instead of having just a monochrome style of tree, which is what we've had so far, I'm adding in every other tree a lighter green, a darker green, maybe a little bit more of a bluer green. And so I don't typically always do this in my landscapes, but if you want to have fun and play with your trees, this is a really great way to get some different values of color. So you can see here, I pulled in some rich green gold by Daniel Smith. That is one of my favorite colors. It goes a long way. It's very powerful. So be mindful of that. But now it's pushed that tree backwards because it's not as concentrated. And this tree is light as well. You can have some fun while your tree is wet and drop in some darker pigment. That's another fun technique. And you can see here on the left-hand side of this bluer tree, it's starting to blend into that green one. And I absolutely love that because it just starts to melt together. Now I'm pulling this tree forward by bringing it down a little bit more. And with this tree, I am mixing the darker values and the lighter values of the different hues of green. So you can see it's darker at the top. It gets a little bit more of that green gold. And then I'm going into more of that bluer green. And then I pull some of my perline green, so that more darker green. So you can see there's lots of different hues happening here. So if you like color, this is a beautiful way to get lots of different color and variation within your forest. And it kind of makes it look like there's different amounts of light hitting your trees. So I definitely recommend playing with that. It's so much fun. You can see the differences here between the two as far as having one solid color versus having multiple colors. So a lot of fun there. So you'll have to let me know what you think. And be sure to share your pictures with me, whether that's on Instagram or Facebook. And of course, be sure to check out my course if you haven't already. Again, it is on sale right now for 20% off. And you get lifetime access. And I hope to see you there and interact with you in the discussion board and help you with your trees. All right, everyone, take care.